were the intelligent leaders of the world. Business, behind the scenes in government, were terrified. They'd seen 30 million people killed in Russia and in Europe, and it seemed apparent to them, because we'd gone through almost a century of relative peace in the world, only little minor wars. It was obvious to them that the continued development of technology of weapons would result in technology that would literally potentially destroy life as we knew it, and certainly everything that made life livable. They got together in 1921 and formed a Council of Foreign Relations. These were people who were connected with the royal family in England and like-minded people in America and other countries, and they decided that the nation state could not endure, or mankind would not endure. They anticipated that technology would result in what it finally did at the end of World War II. They began planning against great resistance, because really since about 1600 and the Westphalia Treaty, the nation state was very central to the thinking of mankind, that would defend your culture, your land. And yet they said, eventually, if we have individual nation states and the weapons that are continually being developed, that we'll end up with a war that you won't even want to survive. And then World War II happened. With all the resistance, and the League of Nations fell apart, and people didn't believe in it, and especially America stayed out, and then World War II. And then with the development of nuclear weapons, these people, and I'm not suggesting that they're all evil, though some of them are very evil, but many of them just felt, we have to get rid of the individual nation state or mankind will literally not survive. And they realized after many study groups that if they presented this as something to be voted upon, that they would never get an agreement. That people love their nation state, they love the independence of their own country, and they would never trust unknown bureaucrats to rule them wisely because of the fallen nature of mankind. So they made a decision after World War II. And that decision was, we are going to introduce global government by stealth. Virtually everyone who was involved in writing the United Nations Treaty belonged to a group that was formed in 1921, this Council of Foreign Relations. This group now presently has about 3,200 people. They are the elite of the world: business, education, past politicians and present politicians. They operate in secret. They consider themselves global citizens. If you listen to them talk, you would conclude that they're traitors. In their own mind, they don't think of it that way. They think that they're smarter than us and realize that they know what's good for us. And what's good for us, they believe, is a global government, not only economically, but politically, but to save the world from what they believe is certain destruction if we have individual states, that eventually somebody like North Korea or Iran or Russia is going to do something crazy, and you wouldn't want to be the survivor when it's all over. Motivated by that thought, other groups began to form after World War II, the Bilderberger Group. This is about 105 people. These are groups that you cannot join. You have to be invited. This Bilderberger Group is both American, Canadian, and European. They have more wealth than the 105 general, usual members than all the rest of the United States put together. These individuals, operating in secret, under what's called the Chatham House Rules, which means no reporting is ever given of anything that is said, nor who says it. That doesn't mean the head of the New York Times and Washington Post don't come to their meetings, because they do, but they've never, ever run a single report. Well, what happened in '96? After a referendum that was designed by the Quebecois to separate Quebec from Canada, by the grace of God, the referendum was defeated. The next year, there was a Bilderberger meeting in Toronto. Henry Kissinger stood in the hallway, according to several sources I've talked to, screaming at the Canadian Prime Minister, Jean Chrétien, because he had finally, though he was a member of the group, had finally tried to stop the referendum from passing. It was later revealed that the plan was that if they won by one vote, that they would negotiate with the rest of Canada for a better deal. the fact was that night at midnight they would separate unilaterally from Canada. Why? The Bilderbergers believed that they could then absorb the Maritimes of Canada, the eastern part of Canada, into the United States, because Canada would be unviable politically and also economically if Quebec, which separates us. Imagine right down the center of the United States, a huge state, and it wants to separate. It would just destroy everything. And then the West would have to be absorbed. And he was screaming at him, saying, "How dare you get in the way of what we planned for years?" The idea was to unite Canada, the United States, then to unite Mexico to the United States, and to move a whole lot of American companies down to Mexico. And the thought was that will stop the Mexicans from coming in because they'll have great jobs, etc., down there. These people are operating behind the scenes thinking that they know better than everyone else. They are working behind the scenes to achieve a global government, and they are on the rush. They said, and this was David Rockefeller who formed the Trilateral Commission, which is a group of Asia, Europe, and America, another group, only about 300 members. In the Reagan presidency, though he himself was not a member, 300 members of his cabinet and below that, key members, were members of the Trilateral Commission. I mean, they are the ruling class of America and have been really since about World War II. And they have a plan, and that is to unite America to Canada and Mexico, that Europe's already united. Unite North America, then we bring in South America, and Asia does the same thing. They've got a plan over there too. And they know they couldn't go from nation state to a global government in one fell swoop. The idea was, we're going to do it in threes. We're going to get those together, then we'll unite in the final zone, all three together. That's the plan. They're on their way, and part of it was we need a trigger, says David Rockefeller 20 years ago, and I have it in writing, and I quote it. He said, "We will never achieve it because of the patriotism of Americans unless we trigger a global international financial collapse so that in fear, the politicians and the citizens will agree to whatever we propose." The chief of staff of Obama, between the election and inauguration, said, "The good thing about crisis is that we can get the things that need to be done that we could never get without crisis." You think about that and ask yourself, do you think this is an accident? Anyone could see what I saw back in '95 when I wrote Final Warning. And I've had countless people call me and say, "Grant, you must be a prophet." I said, "No, I'm a student of finance and intelligence and the history, and I'm a student of Bible prophecy. I'm not a prophet." But that's what was obvious, the way we were going. And it's all coming to pass. But just understand that man proposes, but God disposes. Nothing's going to happen to your country or mine unless God allows it for his own purpose.